The morning mist clung to the forest floor as Jack made his way through the ancient woods, his boots crushing dried leaves beneath him. He was a simple woodcutter from the human settlement of Thornhaven, nothing more. Yet today, something extraordinary had decided otherwise. It started with a sound of soft chirping, almost musical, that didn't belong to any bird Jack knew. He paused, axe resting on his shoulder, and turned to find a creature no larger than his fist stumbling through the undergrowth. Scales, the color of molten copper, caught the dawn light, and wings delicate as parchment fluttered uselessly at its sides. A dragon hatchling. Jack's breath caught. Dragons were legends in this realm, creatures of the elder races who had vanished centuries ago. The elves spoke of them in hushed reverence. The dwarves carved their likenesses into mountain holes. But humans only knew dragons from faded tapestries and half-remembered songs. The hatchling chirped again, stumbling forward on legs that seemed too unsteady, its eyes bright gold and impossibly aware fixed on Jack with an intensity that made his heart skip. "Shoo," Jack said, waving his hand. "Go on, little one. Find your mother." The hatchling tilted its head, then took 3 more wobbling steps toward him. Jack turned and continued walking. He had timber to cut, a quota to meet. The settlement depended on his work, and he couldn't afford distractions, no matter how unprecedented. But the chirping followed. Every few minutes, Jack would glance back. The hatchling was there, 10 paces behind, struggling over roots and rocks with determination that bordered on stubborn. Its wings would flap occasionally, lifting it mere inches before it tumbled back down. Yet it never stopped, never gave up. "You're persistent," Jack muttered, pausing at a towering oak. "I'll give you that." He set to work, his axe biting into the ancient wood with practiced precision. The rhythmic sound of chopping filled the air, and for a while, Jack forgot about his unusual shadow. That is, until he felt something warm settle against his boot. Jack looked down. The hatchling had curled itself against his left foot, wings tucked, eyes half closed. A tiny rumble somewhere between a purr and a growl emanated from its chest. No, Jack said, shaking his foot gently. "You can't stay there. I'm working." The hatchling's eyes opened fully, meeting his. There was no fear in that gaze, no uncertainty, only trust, absolute, unwavering trust. Something twisted in Jack's chest. He continued his work, careful not to move his left foot too much. The hatchling dozed peacefully, undisturbed by the thundering crashes of falling timber. By the time the sun reached its zenith, Jack had felled 3 trees and stacked the lumber. He'd also accepted an uncomfortable truth. The dragon had chosen him. "This is ridiculous," Jack said aloud, addressing the sleeping creature. "I'm human. Do you understand that? Humans don't bond with dragons. We don't have magic in our veins like the elves. We don't have ancient pacts like the dwarves. We're just us." The hatchling yawned, revealing tiny needle-sharp teeth, and stretched against his boot. Then it looked up at him with those impossible golden eyes and chirped a sound so hopeful, so innocent, that Jack felt his resolve crumble. He sighed, lowering himself to sit on a stump. "All right then, let's see you." Jack reached down, and the hatchling immediately scrambled into his hands. It was warm, almost hot, and he could feel a heartbeat racing beneath the scales. The creature nuzzled against his palm, making that rumbling sound again. "You really have chosen wrong, you know," Jack whispered. "The elves would give you a palace. The dwarves would forge you armor of stone. What can a human woodcutter offer?" As if in answer, the hatchling climbed up his arm, scales catching on his rough shirt, until it reached his shoulder. There it settled, tiny claws gripping fabric, and pressed its head against his neck. The warmth spread through Jack like sunlight breaking through clouds. And then he understood this wasn't about magic or ancient bloodlines. It wasn't about what species could offer the most prestige or power. The hatchling had followed him because of something simpler, something the other races had perhaps forgotten in their centuries of tradition and ritual. Choice, trust, the decision to stand beside someone not because prophecy demanded it or duty required it, but because in that moment, in that clearing, with mist still clinging to the ground, it had felt right. Humans didn't have magic. They didn't have millennia of but they had something else. The ability to adapt, to accept, to love the unprecedented without needing to understand every detail first. Jack stood, adjusting his stance to accommodate his new companion. "All right, little one. If you're choosing to stay, then I suppose I'm choosing to keep you. But we're doing this the human way, which means figuring it out as we go." The hatchling chirped, and Jack could have sworn it sounded like approval. As he gathered his tools and prepared for the journey home, Jack thought about the reactions he'd face. Anna, the settlement's healer and his closest friend, would probably laugh herself breathless before insisting on examining the creature. The elders would be baffled, the children would be delighted, and somewhere in some ancient dragon area Mother Dragon was likely searching. Jack would have to deal with that eventually. But for now, with the sun warm on his face and a legendary creature nestled against his neck, he allowed himself a smile. The other races might have their grand traditions of dragon bonding, their sacred rituals and ancient rites, but today, in this forest, a dragon hatchling had chosen a human woodcutter's feet as home, and that, Jack decided, was perhaps the most human thing of all, being chosen not for what you were supposed to be, but for who you simply were. The hatchling rumbled contentedly as they walked, and Jack found himself humming an old human work song. Behind them, the forest watched in silence, witness to the beginning of a bond that would become legend, not because it was prophesied, not because it was planned, but because one morning a stubborn little dragon decided that home wasn't a place or a palace, it was a person, and that person was human. The end.